Hello there. Today I'm going to be talking about hair. Every one of you, even those of you across the pond who don't know squat about the First Nations, well, you've heard the term Mohawk, right? Because you know the hairstyle. Right? The hairstyle is more famous than us, the people. Now, those of you who know a little bit more, you might have heard that the Mohawk hairstyle didn't actually belong to the Mohawk people. I want to talk about that today. So first off, let's talk about where that hairstyle came from. I went through a whole bunch of old pictures looking for anybody with that haircut. A bunch of woodcuts, bunch of sketches, bunch of paintings. I didn't find a single Mohawk sporting that haircut. The nearest picture I found, it was a woodcut of John Smith capturing the chief of Pamunkey? The picture's on the screen right now. I don't remember the word. One of the members of the Powhatan Confederacy, a group of Algonquins down in New England, I guess. That was the nearest one I could find. Another one I found, I couldn't find I think it was like Shawnee. He had the Mohawk thing, but he also had the sort of like a monk's tonsure. I found that interesting. But the hairstyle is most famously attributed to the Pawnee. I'm going to come back to this in a second. Talk about how the Pawnee hairstyle came to be called the Mohawk hairstyle. First, I want to talk about what the Mohawk hairstyle actually was. So there's three things. First, there's your civilian hairstyles. Now, these could be anything, right? Just down to personal preference. It was generally worn long, right? Long hair is seen as it's a symbol of your strength, right? Your good physical health. Right? Back in the days before modern cosmetics, if you want to have long, beautiful hair, you need to be a pretty healthy individual. Sickly people with a poor diet, they're not going to be able to grow their hair very long. Right? You got a maximum length to your hair, and your health determines that to an extent. What I'm wearing here, this is the hairstyle I've had most of my life. This is a perfectly historical hairstyle. My uncle, he takes all his hair, he does it back in a ponytail, keeps it long like that. And that's perfectly historical. My brother, he takes the sides of his hair, he ties them into a ponytail, but then he leaves the back just loose. That's perfectly historical. Now, your hairstyle sort of tells people something about you. Right? So me, I have it sort of, I don't know, a little bit unkempt, a little bit tangled, a little bit greasy. That tells people that I'm a sort of a lazy person who's not really too concerned with appearances. Not the most flattering thing to say about yourself, but it is what it is. Someone else, something that was done was braids. Men back in the day liked to braid their hair, and what this shows all the women around you is that you got the patience for that kind of fiddly work, and you also care about what they think of you. Sometimes things like feathers would be braided into the hair, or beads, and this, that, and the other thing. So that's sort of a civilian hairstyle. Anybody might wear that. And the next thing I want to talk about is mourning. So there's a custom that's shared by pretty much every First Nations group right across the continent of cutting your hair in mourning. Now, this does two things. One, it shows the world around you. It shows all of your people that you are in mourning. It's sort of like the Victorian custom. You wear black when you're in mourning, right? It's exactly like that. It's also sort of like a tribute. So you lose somebody, you cut your hair, which is so important to you, as a tribute to your grief, right? You mean this much to me that I'm willing to cut my hair. I mentioned it's sort of like wearing black to express your grief. It's like that in more ways than one. You would grow your hair long again when you're coming out of mourning. Back a little over 2 years ago, I lost my grandma. And I cut my hair short. When I started this channel, it was about 6 months or so after that. So you look at some of my earlier videos, you're going to see me with short hair. After I lost her, I kept it short for a couple of months. I give myself a little trim every couple of months. Then after a while, I stopped doing that. 2 years later, 2 years plus later, I got my hair long again. 6 months ago or whatever, on the anniversary of her death, I was thinking about her and thinking, those were good memories, weren't they? Right? I could think about her and I wasn't sad. And I find it an interesting coincidence that the time it took me to come out of mourning was about the same length of time that it took me to grow my hair long again. I find that a very interesting coincidence, and I wonder if I think that's part of the reason behind it, right? You cut your hair short, and by the time it's long again, people will know you've moved on. The third sort of thing was the military haircut. Now, what this was was you'd have the whole of the head plucked, except for the little flat section right at the top of your scalp. Right there you'd have a square section or an ovular section that you left long. Right? You'd braid that and decorate it with feathers and this, that, and the other thing. Now this hairstyle was not an exclusively Mohawk hairstyle. Right? The other Six Nations, they used it as well, as did people like the Cherokee. It's a very common hairstyle right across the eastern woodlands. This sort of hairstyle is associated with warriors. I want to talk about that. So I've been trying to think of a good word to describe what I'm talking about, but there isn't one. So let me just... There are warriors, as in anybody who makes war, anybody who fights, right? So a civilian, he could be a warrior in a time of conflict. But then in addition to that, there are warriors who devote their lives to the craft. Right, now this hairstyle is associated with that group, right? The professional warriors, the people whose business is war. Not the civilians who are gone to war, the people who've made it the focus of their lives. That's what the hairstyle is associated with. Note, association is not an absolute term. There are always exceptions, and sometimes associations are incorrect. Right across the continent, you're going to see a lot of warrior hairstyles with portions of the head shaved and portions left long. I heard a theory about this, and I'm not entirely confident in this theory, but it's something. So the theory is that it has to do with scalping. So people take your scalp to take a portion of your strength, right? Keep your spirit from coming back against him. However, if I've only got a little bit of my hair left, you can't get my whole power, right? That's the theory. You can only get a little portion of it. Now, of course, you don't want to shave your whole head because that sacrifices all of your power, and you're going to need that in battle. So that's the theory. I don't know what I think of it. It's poorly sourced, and it's kind of woo-woo, but it's the best theory I've heard. If this theory holds true, what the warrior's hairstyle signifies to the people around you is that I am prepared to die here and now for my people, right? I am prepared to die at a moment's notice, without regret, without complaint, for my people, right? Now, I find that an interesting sort of idea. Right? That bit I'm more on board with than the former theory that I posited. Now, I talked about there are civilian warriors, right? Citizen soldier type things, and then there are professionals, right? People who are devoted wholly to the craft. I want to illustrate that point here. So if we look at the painting, The Four Mohawk Kings, the one of them, Peter Brandt, he's got these elaborate facial tattoos, which, as I mentioned in my previous video, they're a document of his military achievements. So you can see right from his face that this guy is a very experienced veteran warrior, and yet he's not wearing the warrior scalp lock type thing. Right? He was a warrior, but he wasn't a warrior, right? That's a frustrating bit of double meaning there, right? I'm going to put my hat back on. It's a little bit chilly. Wind just picked up a little bit. Oh, my ear. Take it from me, don't ever let yourself get frostbitten. No, I said I want to talk about where the hairstyle comes from, the Mohawk hairstyle, as you're all familiar with it. So there's a famous anecdote about some Mohawk soldiers in the Second World War. I think they were like paratroopers Now they had I'm going to have to take my hat off again. They had their crew cut, and then they shaved the sides and left the center ridge. You might think, well, there you have it, some Mohawk soldiers doing the Mohawk hairstyle. Maybe you're right. I'm not going to exclude the possibility that it was a Mohawk hairstyle historically. But I have another theory that I'd like to put forward. I don't have anything to base this on really, but it's a theory. I mentioned that the hairstyle is most famously associated with the Pawnee. Now, in a lot of the old westerns, the Pawnee are the favorite enemy, right? Right. Some of these westerns, they got friendly Indians, but the Pawnee, they're always portrayed as the treacherous, black-hearted Indians. Even like revisionist westerns like Dances with Wolves, which are trying to romanticize the Indian, the Pawnee are the enemies there. There's sort of an effect, interesting sociological effect called pan-Indianism. Some of you might be familiar with pan-Indianism as sort of a movement, a political movement, but it's also like a social effect. Because there's so very little media that portrays First Nations people, we sort of latch on to whatever we can get, right? I've never met a fellow from the Coeur d'Alene Reservation, right? I've never met anyone from there. There's not very many of them. And yet, everybody I know can quote smoke signals, right? I know all of these fry bread memes. I don't have fry bread, I have scones. Scones, basically the same thing, but it's a different word. Anybody can say, and she ripped the fry bread in two, right? That sort of thing. You sort of latch on to anything you can get. For another example from that same movie, Thomas is made fun of for trying to be like Graham Greene's character in Dances with Wolves. A Coeur d'Alene fella trying to be like a Lakota who is portrayed by an Oneida, right? I know a great deal about the Lakota because they're the ones that are in all the movies, right? A lot of the activists that I've listened to, Russell Means, Aglala Lakota. So I've sort of picked up stuff from them just through my exposure through mass media and whatever. I think that's sort of what happened here. So you've got these Mohawk paratroopers and they're going into battle and they're, okay, we're gonna give those Germans what for. We're gonna show Fritz who's the man, right? And one of them gets the idea, you know what would really scare Fritz is if a group of proper Indians come barreling down towards him. All right, how can we make ourselves look the part, right? We just look like soldiers here, just a little bit browner. Well, let's shave our head, let's do up our faces a little bit. And they think, okay, what's the image of an Indian warrior? And they go and look at the John Wayne westerns or whatever was Pawnee or the normal enemy, so let's do that hairstyle, right? Let's do that hairstyle from the movies. Yeah, that'll get Kaiser Bill running with his tail between his legs. Right, now, that's sort of a little bit of a far-fetched theory, but I think it's entertaining to listen to nonetheless. Right? A group of Mohawks, they're taking what they saw on TV, the Pawnee, and they're adopting it, right? The pan-Indianism, and then this hairstyle becomes the Mohawk hairstyle, right? It's just a fascinating thought to me. I found another theory that's a little bit stronger. The '39 film Drums Along the Mohawk features some people wearing exaggerated hairstyles. The filmmakers picked this style because, well, that's what Indians look like in the other westerns, or maybe just because it looks ferocious. American propaganda film, after all. So the theory is that maybe those same Mohawk paratroopers saw this film and thought, oh, that's what we should look like. I guess you can take this as another example of why filmmakers should try and get the details right. I suppose that's all I have to say on the subject. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this as interesting as I did. Not the best research here, but, you know, what have you. Bye-bye.